To a case in Queensland that might be the new norm if a voice to Parliament succeeds in October, the Albanese government has done a mass injustice to the council in Redlands, an area just outside of Brisbane, who are fighting a mammoth native title claim. Joining us to explain this is Liberal MP Henry Pike. Henry, tell us about this case and what's happened here.
Thanks, Rita. Well, this is a massive, as you said, a mammoth native title claim that's taking place within my electorate in Brisbane's Bayside. And effectively, it is a request for 3,500 council-owned or managed properties throughout the suburban area. So you can think about it as little parks, playgrounds, nature reserves, right through to the council chambers themselves, the Performing Arts Centre that we have in the city, right through to the Cleveland Cemetery, where some of our founders of our city are buried. So it's quite a huge claim, and council are going to have to face years of litigation in the federal court to determine whether native title exists or has been extinguished on all these blocks, and it's going to cost ratepayers millions of dollars and take years and years to finally come to a conclusion. And unfortunately, what's occurred is that the federal government has gotten rid of a funding program called the Native Title Respondent Scheme. And that was a way in which the federal government could help fund some of the expenses that are faced by by respondents who have to respond to these claims that are being made under the Native Title Act.
So Council is going to be on the hook here, essentially, is what you're saying, for litigating hundreds, if not thousands, of these claims here. Now, tell us, if those who are making the claims succeed in their claims, and we're talking about all sorts of council-run properties, lots, all sorts of buildings, what is the practical impact and what could happen if those claims are upheld?
Well, it's a very good question, James. We simply don't know because the claimants aren't being clear about their intentions. What we could imagine is that potentially some of the properties will be taken for their exclusive use, and we've also seen a successful native title claim made on North Stradbroke Island, which is within my electorate. So we've seen in those instances there, we've seen some of the properties that were run by council taken over by the prescribed body corporate and closed down as camping grounds or given for exclusive use to Indigenous owners.
So potentially then there could be campgrounds, playgrounds, other sorts of council property that is right now available to all Australians to use that is, as a result of this litigation, simply racially divided and saying, if you are not from this mob or Aboriginal, you cannot use this playground, this park, this campsite, whatever.
I could foresee that happening, James, because we've seen that happen at North Stradbroke Island just across the bay. But also I could foresee that a lot of the properties might be leased back to council, which would then create an extra cost on ratepayers to have to use the assets that they currently own.
So I just want to get this straight. You said the federal government, the Albanese government, has scrapped this respondent funding scheme. So they've given millions of dollars, $28 million to the claimants, the ones making the native title claim, but the respondents who are fighting against that claim are going to get how much from the federal government? Zero?
That's right, Rita. Not a single cent from the federal government. I've written to the Attorney General and I've said that's just unfair. You know, we're in the midst of a referendum at the moment where we're talking about recognition and we're dealing with difficult issues of reconciliation. And I think just your average punter within my electorate are quite concerned when they hear that the federal government is giving, I think it's $25.8 million last financial year to the body that's running the native title claim, but won't give the council a single cent in order to try to defend the claim. And it's not council's fault. Council didn't dispossess anyone of land, years ago. They are simply trying to deal with the situation that they're in 2023 and trying to meet their obligations under a federal act.
But then what this sounds like to me, looking at it in the national perspective and the voice and how that fits in with the Uluru Statement and the longer form of the statement, which is not a conspiracy theory, it does exist. When you talk about this potential where the native title could be granted and then the property is leased back to the council, essentially that sounds like what we're talking about is basically reparations by stealth. Am I wrong here?
Well, this exists currently. So this is before the voice has even been, or potentially, passed on the 14th of October. Let's hope it's defeated, but we'll see how it goes. But this is all in law now. But what people are telling me who are involved in litigation in this area is that this case is being seen very much as a test case for what's possible in terms of native title claims within suburban areas. So we're used to native title claims over pastoral leases or out in mining areas, but here this is a native title claim over suburban Australia that involves the playground at the end of your street or the reserve where we're going to build a bike path. This is the sort of stuff that is now going to affect many millions of Australians who are now living within or who live within suburban Australia, and it's of deep concern to locals in my community and should be deep concern to Australians everywhere.
Henry, I'm just curious, you said this decision could well affect millions of Australians, but specifically in your shire, how many people in the Redlands Shire and how many people are represented by the claimants?
It's a very good question. There's 160,000 within the Redlands, but the claimants, the way that it works, essentially you only have a small number of claimants who make the claim on behalf of the traditional owners. So, we haven't got a clear understanding as to how many claimants, but it could just be a handful, really.
Amazing.
This is just incredible because it's just not an even fight here. I mean, you've got one side being funded by the federal government to the tune of millions, upwards of $28 million, and the other side. So where is council going to raise this money to fight this? Are the rates going to skyrocket in that area? How are they going to, or are they going to come to some sort of a settlement because it's going to be too expensive to actually fight this without having the respondent funding scheme?
Unfortunately, I think we're going to see rates go even higher in the Redlands, and we've already got some of the highest rates within southeast Queensland, as many of my residents complain about. But you can only imagine that cost is going to have to be borne by the ratepayers. The most important thing is that it just creates uncertainty around the tenure. So there's heaps of sporting clubs and different groups who hire these venues and these facilities from council, and now are scared to make any investment because they just don't know whether they're going to own the land or have the lease over the land moving forward. So there's a lot of investment being held up, a lot of maintenance being held up. And it's really, without that funding scheme, this is just going to drag on for years. And council's not going to be in a rush to resolve it because they don't want to have to pay the huge bill. The claimants certainly won't be in a rush to resolve it. It's just going to drag on and on and on and just be a terrible burden for the city when we should be investing and growing, heading into the 2032 Olympics, which our region will help host. We want to be making some big investments on these properties. We don't want to be holding back and being tied in courts. And certainly we don't want to be paying higher rates.
Henry Pike, thank you so much for telling us about this. I was not aware of this battle at all. Thanks for joining us today.